Who is your woman? Who is the Nicole Zisman woman?
The Nicole Zisman woman. So my brand looks at this idea of contemporary womanhood as being a constant elevation of pain or suffering of any kind to wisdom. So effectively, if all suffering has meaning, then joy, rather than being a feeling that you wait for, is actually, it becomes a framework that you put yourself in order to receive authentic messaging from the universe, your own authenticity and your own clarity. And, my brand is also very much on this idea that authenticity is the new modernity. So I guess this idea of, who's the muse of the brand? The muse is a person that's either already there or that wants to get there, that knows they want to get there and are working to get there.
That's lovely. I wanted to hear about the collection, Wisdom is the Memory Without the Emotion, which you launched your brand with and presented in showroom format at Sarabande Foundation. Can you tell me a little bit about the kind of raison d'etre of this collection?
Yeah, absolutely. It starts with this memory from, I believe, 2005 of being in Caracas, Venezuela, which is where my family is from. Being there for one of my mother's cousin's weddings, one of the many mother's cousins' weddings. And in Caracas, you don't, at least at the time, you wouldn't kind of go buy a dress. You would go have it custom made. And it was very affordable and it was just the done thing. So you'd go and be measured and you'd have the dresses made for you. And I walked in as a maybe 10-year-old and I just thought it was the most beautiful place I'd ever seen in my life. This workshop with all these machines and all these craftspeople. And I think that's the seamstresses could see that I was thrilled, thrilled beyond. So they gave me these kind of 2 massive bags of fabric, like genuinely this big. And you imagine how small I was. My parents actually let me take them back home with us on the plane, which was lovely of them. But then from that point on, I would use those scraps of fabric from La Costurera in Caracas, from the seamstresses, to make kind of small projects to eventually develop into garments or sort of things for soft toys or whatever else. And I'd actually cut these fabrics with my great-grandmother Leia's scissors, because she and her husband had a fabric shop in Venezuela called Almacenes La Selecta. And my mother somehow ended up with these scissors. So I got to use them growing up to cut my projects and really kind of, at that point, build up a portfolio to go and study fashion. The collection itself looks at these Venezuelan Jewish weddings. And the feeling you have when you're in them, that's this kind of hyper beauty and hyper glamour that's kind of pervasive everywhere. That's a given. That's going to last forever. That's just a truth. And when Venezuela fell into dictatorship, it actually caused a bit of a break, because obviously the families had to, my community, my family's community, the Venezuelan Jews, as well as many, many other Venezuelans had to leave, had to flee. Yeah. And suddenly the community was faced with challenges that it had never dealt with before, it had never faced before. And suddenly people were falling into fears and potentially addictions and just, not so great ways of dealing with challenges. And so effectively this collection, Wisdom is the Memory Without the Emotion, it takes this story, my family story, and it catapults it into London now and contemporary womanhood in London now. And this idea of kind of like constantly running and returning, as a Londoner and as a woman in London. But also as well with my brand's ethos of, contemporary womanhood is elevating pain to wisdom. So it's not a sadness that the collection looks at this memory with. It's actually a real optimism. Yeah. It looks at this break, at this, what's called a tzimtzum in Kabbalah. It looks at this break as actually containing a huge amount of potential for newness. Yeah. And that's sort of where the collection ends up, is this kind of mashing of history with the now in London. I have to discuss Francesco. Without Dr. Francesco Mazzarella, who is actually a principal investigator at Center for Sustainable Fashion on a project called Decolonizing Fashion and Textiles, which I work on. We actually met pretty much as soon as I graduated Central St. Martin's BA Fashion in 2019. And we met, and right away I began a residency with him and created a body of work that kind of slotted into a larger project of his. And since then, he's just been a really, really fabulous mentor. So for this collection, of course, it was, getting finance for it and all these other elements, but we actually designed together an opportunity within my brand for his project participants. So his project, which I'm currently working on, as I sort of said, works with London-based creatives that have either refugee or asylum seeker status, legal status. And it sort of aims to give them creative agency to tell their stories. So it looks at almost cultural sustainability as another pillar of sustainability. The British Fashion Council has, a few different pillars on their Institute of Positive Fashion Forum. It's, a great resource. But we designed a special internship program for his project participants to be able to learn industry skills in an environment that's really sort of set up for them to succeed and takes into account their various needs and barriers. So, Francesco's been absolutely fantastic to me.
Wow, that's great. Can we discuss the shattered glass technique?
Yeah, absolutely. So the shattered glass technique within autumn-winter 2024 is actually in this look. And the technique actually takes a raw material, so normally recycled plastic, and it prints an image on the back of it. And then the entire sheet is sent to a laser cutter, which then will kind of cut the custom sequins. Then the sequins are stitched onto a crinoline or another fabric. So it's almost like a puzzle. Like you're kind of almost hand stitching meticulously this puzzle, which forms this entire image. Normally it's a collage of several different garments. Here it is a collage alongside some sketches over. And this technique is really special to me because I've used it, of course, in my fashion work, but also in my special projects. So for example, within an installation that I did with Jeremy Keenan at Ensoft Gallery in 2022, where we made these kind of broken glass shirts that Jeremy lit really beautifully and made revolve. And they really, for me, kind of draw down this concept in Kabbalah of the tzimtzum, so that breaking for the purpose of creating something in that space that's left behind. So in that context, actually, brokenness is something very beautiful. So this technique for me is really a core technique within my brand and my work.
Something I find really interesting about it is the way that it's this kind of laborious technique to make something which is still like a shadow of something or an imitation. You're talking about like the sequins. It's kind of quite like an evocative thing about what we leave behind, or I just think it's really, really interesting, beautiful.
Thank you.
So something that me and you talk about a lot, which is the kind of artist versus designer. As an artist-designer brand, where do you kind of sit with this question about whether you're an artist or a designer?
Yeah. I think this question is one that's come up basically even before graduating from St. Martin's, really, because as I was making the BA collection, that was the first question on everyone's, that my tutors would ask and my colleagues would ask is like, is this art, is this fashion? And that question followed me through the 4 years. It plagued, to be honest, yeah. It kind of did plague me for the 4 years or so that I was working as an artist designer before launching the brand. I mean, okay, so I think effectively there's art and fashion, and for me, they are different. Fashion can be art, but there are differences in the sense that with art, with fine art, contemporary art, the parameters of what you can actually do are effectively endless, because the only thing you really have to achieve is some kind of emotional or intellectual kind of spark with the work. And sometimes it's not even that. Sometimes it's just that you have to achieve kind of a visual strength or a visual beauty or pleasantness or whatever it is. But then with fashion and with design, you have to do that, but actually as well, she has to be able to get into it. She needs to, there needs to be somewhere for her to put her arms. Yeah. There needs to be some kind of closure, opening, can her head fit through? Can she walk? All these different considerations. And so it is an applied art. Yeah. And it's also always in the context of the body, which art is not always. So I think for me, this question, yes, as you say, it's plagued me, but I think now it's at the point where it's very clear that rather than cross-disciplinarity, I think what it is multidisciplinarity. Yeah. Because I've done both and I'm doing both. And, actually your talk about 2 months ago at Marlborough Gallery was really inspiring to me in answering this question, because you were speaking about actually opening that sort of your visual world, what you allow into it and how far can you expand it without it becoming a bit, diffuse, or, how little do you contain it? And, this ability to work in a multidisciplinary way allows me to really build a visual archive
100%
for my brand,
because it's the constraints. I mean, like I'm an artist now. I'm a kind of a painter person making pictures on paper or panel, and I think in the same way it's the constraint which is the freedom. You get this whole kind of world, and I do that more in a kind of directly of making dolls, like, and how you've been doing kind of installation and sculpture, is that you build things that are outside of that narrow thing in order for them to become a part of it. Yeah. And that's a really big thing, I think.
It's a real strength in wall building.
Like, which look was it on here?
Yeah.
That was...
So it's the...
where, I mean, see, because this kind of thing, I'm like, oh, it's really sad. The way that you have a dress which is printed with an image that's from a kind of work that you made with Jeremy Keegan at Ensoff Gallery, and how something that existed as an art in the physical world then becomes flat and becomes this
absolutely
garment.
And then it also, what it does is it carries that original meaning and applies it to a print within a design. Yeah. So that's actually in a way that you do this as well with your work. But that for me has become a real kind of bread and butter as to how I design. I mean, again, another example from Wisdom is the Memory Without the Emotion is this dress, which actually was redesigned based off of a look in my BA collection, which was actually a bit mad, but it was a screen that was mounted on a model, various contraptions to make that work. And it walked down the runway of the CSM press show of 2019, playing a film of a dress that, for me at the time, was really important research-wise. And for this collection, what we did is we took that dress, that kind of archive piece, which was a screen with a moving image, and we took the dress that was within that film and we redesigned it. And we kind of thought, okay, well, this is a real dress. How are we going to make it? What are we going to make it out of? How do we style it? And all these things. Yeah. And in a way, that's what becomes real. Yeah. And also it's such a kind of like direct physical metaphor for a lot of the themes within this collection, because it's the idea that wisdom is something that's passed on and kind of transmuted into different things in different ways and across diaspora in different places. There's something about a quite literal thing of something being from this period and then it becoming a part of a newer collection that and kind of the meaning like traveling with it. It's a really special and beautiful observation from you. Thank you for that. Look, I started this brand 4 years after graduating, which is really fantastic because I had that opportunity to build that visual archive for the business. And for so many of the reasons you also said, Wisdom is the Memory Without the Emotion was that launch collection. But actually this collection it's kind of become an ethos of the entire brand going forward.
Yeah.